They say the mountains remember. I know they do. Because what they remember, they sometimes share, and it changes you forever. Before that hike, I was just your average guy, Mark, a graphic designer with a penchant for craft beer and weekend adventures. My girlfriend, Chloe, a vibrant force of nature who worked in marketing, shared my love for the untamed. Together, we thought we were invincible, ready to conquer any trail the world threw at us. Boy, were we wrong about the Appalachians. It was late autumn, a Tuesday in November, when we decided to tackle a lesser-known loop deep within the Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth, and pine leaves, mostly fallen, crunched under our boots, a symphony of decay and natural beauty. Chloe, bundled in her favorite burgundy Patagonia, was humming an upbeat tune, her breath misting in the cool air. I had my trusty camera slung over my shoulder, ready to capture the breathtaking vistas. The plan was a 2-day trek, camping overnight, at one of the primitive sites near an old, forgotten logging road. It felt like an escape, a chance to disconnect from our screens and reconnect with something real. The first few hours were exactly what we'd hoped for. Sunlight filtered through the sparse canopy, painting shifting patterns on the forest floor. We spotted deer, heard the distant call of a hawk, and talked about everything and nothing. But as the sun began its slow descent, dipping below the ragged peaks, the forest's demeanor shifted. The cheerful chirping of birds dwindled, replaced by an oppressive, almost palpable silence. It was the kind of silence that hummed, a low, unnerving thrum that vibrated in your bones. "Getting kinda quiet, huh?" Chloe whispered, her voice barely a breath, as if afraid to disturb the stillness. I nodded, my eyes scanning the dense undergrowth. The trees, once majestic, now seemed to press in, their skeletal branches reaching like grasping claws. That's when I started to hear it faint, distant whispers carried on the wind. Not distinct words, just a low guttural murmur that seemed to coil around the trunks of the ancient oaks. I dismissed it as wind, or maybe the rustling of distant animals, but the feeling of being watched intensified, a prickle on the back of my neck that wouldn't go away. We pushed on, eager to reach our campsite before full darkness descended. The trail, never well marked, became increasingly indistinct, almost swallowed by the encroaching shadows. We consulted our map, then my GPS, but the path seemed to twist and reform, defying logic. A landmark tree I'd noted minutes ago would vanish, replaced by another, eerily similar, yet subtly wrong. Disorientation began to set in, a creeping tendril of panic that tightened its grip around my chest. Then the hallucinations started, small at first, almost imperceptible. A flash of movement in my peripheral vision, a hunched figure darting between the trees, too fast, too low. I'd whip my head around, but nothing, just the deep, darkening woods. Chloe, too, grew quiet, her eyes wide as she scanned the forest. "Did you see that?" she'd whisper, her hand gripping my arm. "Just behind that big maple. Like ... a flash of white." I'd assure her it was just a trick of the light, but my own heart hammered against my ribs as twilight bled into thick night. The whispers grew clearer, distinct now, though still unintelligible. They sounded like a chorus of raspy voices, some high-pitched and keening, others a deep, resonant growl. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, enveloping us. With each step, the air grew colder, heavy with a damp, earthy smell that was somehow sickening. I kept seeing faces in the gnarled bark of the trees, contorted visages, their mouths open in silent screams, their eyes hollow pits that seemed to follow our every move. Chloe swore she saw a pair of red eyes glowing in the darkness, deep within a thicket, watching us without blinking. I tried to tell her it was just an animal, but my own imagination was conjuring impossible shapes in the shadows, things that defied the natural world. We finally stumbled upon what looked like a clearing, but it wasn't our designated campsite. In the center stood a single, ancient oak, its branches skeletal against the ink-black sky. Hanging from its lowest limb was a crude effigy, something woven from dried leaves and thin branches. Vaguely humanoid, but unsettlingly distorted. It swayed gently in a breeze that I couldn't feel, its empty eye sockets staring directly at us. "No," Chloe breathed, her voice trembling. "We need to go now." But before we could turn, the whispers intensified, swirling around us like a physical force. They weren't just sound now. They felt like thoughts, pressing into my mind, cold and alien. I saw Chloe's face warp, her features elongating, her eyes blackening, her mouth stretching into a silent, horrifying scream. My own hands felt like they were shrinking, my skin crawling, as if insects were scurrying beneath it. The forest around us seemed to fold in on itself, the trees bending at impossible angles, their branches twisting into grotesque, grasping fingers. I could taste metallic dust on my tongue, and the air grew thick, pressing down on us until breathing became a strained, desperate gasp. I squeezed my eyes shut, clutching Chloe's hand, willing it to be over, pleading with unknown forces. For sanity, I thought I heard a guttural laugh, deep and echoing, right next to my ear. When I opened my eyes, Chloe was gone. Just the effigy, swaying, and the endless, whispering black. Panic, pure and undiluted, consumed me. "Chloe," I screamed, my voice raw, breaking the suffocating silence. A small sob answered, and I saw her. A few feet away, pressed against the trunk of the gnarled oak, her face buried in her hands. She was trembling violently. My hallucination had been so real, so vivid, it had ripped us apart even when we were standing so close. "We need to run," she sobbed, finally looking up, her eyes wide with unadulterated terror. "Just run." We ran. We ran blindly, stumbling over roots and rocks. Through the whispering shadows, fueled by a primal fear I never knew I possessed. The internal images persisted, Chloe's face contorted by unseen hands, my own body dissolving into a skeletal form, the ground beneath us shifting into a sea of grasping hands. But we clung to each other, our only anchor in the swirling chaos of our minds. We didn't stop until we saw the faint, blessed glow of the highway lights in the distance, a beacon of civilization. We tumbled out of the woods onto the shoulder of a deserted road, gasping for air, covered in mud and scratches. We didn't speak a word until we were safely in our car, the heater blasting, the engine a comforting roar. We drove for hours, not stopping until we were hundreds of miles away from those mountains. That was 6 months ago. We're safe now, or at least, that's what we tell ourselves. But the mountains remembered us. Sometimes, when the house is quiet and the light is just right, I still see faces in the patterns of the wallpaper, or catch a glimpse of a gaunt, hunched figure in my peripheral vision. And Chloe, she wakes up screaming some nights, whispering about red eyes and whispers that follow her home. We both feel it, the cold spot in the room, the lingering scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic and rotten. The silence, too, the humming silence. It's followed us. The Appalachians don't just hold secrets. They cling to you, mark you, and never truly let you go. And sometimes, late at night, I hear those whispers again, just at the edge of hearing, calling my name. If you've ever felt something similar, some inexplicable dread in the wild, or been haunted by a place long after you've left, tell me about it in the comments below. And if stories like this chill you to the bone, make sure to like and subscribe for more tales from the shadowed corners of our world. You never know what's out there waiting for you. The first time I heard my girlfriend Chloe whisper my name, I thought nothing of it. We were 3 days deep into the Pisgah National Forest, the October air crisp enough to bite, and the rust-colored leaves were so thick on the ground they muffled our every footstep. Leo, the voice had sighed, a soft breath just behind my right ear. I'd turned, a smile on my face. Yeah, but Chloe was a good 20 feet ahead of me on the trail, her back to me, focused on navigating a tangle of roots. She hadn't turned. She hadn't spoken. The woods around us were utterly silent, save for the distant caw of a raven. That was the first crack in my sanity. It was a small thing, a hairline fracture, but it was the one that would eventually shatter everything. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. What I'm about to tell you is the reason I don't hike anymore. It's the reason I sometimes have to sleep with the TV on, before I get into the part that still makes my skin crawl. If you're a fan of true scary stories and unexplained encounters, do me a solid and hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that you want more of this stuff. And if you're new here, consider subscribing and ringing that notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, where was I? Ah, yes. The Whisper. We were Leo and Chloe, 28 and 27. A couple of software engineers from Charlotte who traded our ergonomic chairs for trekking poles every chance we got. We weren't amateurs. We had the right gear, the right maps, the right training. We thought we were prepared for anything the Appalachians could throw at us. We were wrong. After the Whisper, I tried to rationalize it. The wind, an auditory hallucination from fatigue, anything. I didn't mention it to Chloe. I didn't want to spook her. But the next day, the sounds became more specific. As I was adjusting the strap on my pack, I heard the distinct zip of a pocket opening on Chloe's bag. "Find the granola bars," I called out. She stopped and looked back at me, her brow furrowed. I didn't open my bag. My blood went cold. I just heard it. The front pocket. She slung her pack around and checked. All the zippers were closed tight. "You're hearing things, Leo. It's probably a beetle or something." But it wasn't a beetle. I knew the sound of our gear, the specific squeak of Chloe's Nalgene bottle as she twisted the cap, the soft, synthetic crinkle of my rain poncho being unfurled, the metallic click of a trekking pole being locked into place. Over the next few hours, I heard them all. Faintly, from the dense rhododendron tunnels and the dark spaces between the ancient trees. They were perfect mimics, echoes of actions that hadn't happened. Chloe started hearing them too. She'd whip her head around, her eyes wide. "Did you just open a food wrapper?" she'd ask, her voice tight. I'd shake my head, and the fear would mount between us, a silent, shared passenger on our journey. The true horror began as dusk started to bleed through the canopy, turning the vibrant forest into a maze of bruised purples and menacing silhouettes. We were setting up our tent in a small clearing, moving with a frantic, unspoken urgency. That's when we heard the talking dot. It wasn't words, not at first. It was just the cadence of a conversation. The low murmur of a male voice, a softer, higher response. It sounded like it was coming from just beyond the tree line, impossibly close. We froze, listening. It sounded conversational, casual, like two people on an evening stroll. "Hello," Chloe called out, her voice trembling slightly. The murmuring stopped. The entire forest held its breath. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. And then a single sound cut through the silence. It was Chloe's laugh, not a happy one. It was the specific, slightly forced laugh she used during an argument we'd had a month prior. A fight about something so stupid I can't even remember what. But I remembered the sound of that laugh. It was a sound born of frustration, and hearing it echo from the dark woods, perfectly replicated, was a violation. I grabbed Chloe's arm. "Pack up. We're not staying here. We're hiking through the night." She didn't argue. Her face was a pale mask of terror. As we frantically stuffed our gear back into our packs, the mimicry became a cruel symphony. We heard the sound of tent poles clattering to the ground, though ours were securely in my hand. We heard the gurgle of our water filter, the click of our headlamp turning on. It was like a ghost version of us was shadowing our every move, replaying our actions. From moments before with chilling accuracy, then came the voice again. This time, it was mine. "I never should have brought you here," it said, a perfect copy of my own tone, laced with a coldness I'd never felt. It came from the trees to our left. Chloe flinched as if struck. "Leo, stop it, that wasn't me," I hissed, grabbing my pack. "It's not fair," came Chloe's voice from the trees to our right. Her tone saturated with a synthesized, mocking pity. It was inside our heads. It was using our own fears, our own private moments, against us. My mind started to fracture. I looked at Chloe, her face illuminated by the stark beam of her headlamp, and for a terrifying second, her mouth seemed too wide, her eyes like black, empty pits. I blinked, and she was just Chloe again, just my terrified girlfriend. But the image was burned into my brain. Was that what was out there? Something that looked like us, but wrong. We half walked, half run down the trail in the pitch dark. The sounds followed, a cacophony of our own existence turned into a weapon. The snap of a twig under my boot would be answered by a dozen identical snaps from the darkness around us. Chloe's panicked breaths were echoed back to us, amplified, distorted. It felt like the forest itself was mocking our struggle to survive, wearing our identities like a costume. We weren't just being hunted, we were being psychologically disassembled hours later. Stumbling, crying, we saw it. The glint of moonlight on a car windshield, the parking lot. We burst from the tree line and sprinted across the gravel, fumbling with the keys. We threw our packs in the back and slammed the doors. The sound of the locks clicking shut, the most satisfying noise I had ever heard. For a moment, there was only the sound of our own ragged breathing inside the car. Silence, blessed silence. I started the engine, the headlights cutting a brilliant, safe path through the darkness. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I couldn't. I just drove. We didn't speak for the first hour. The spell was broken. We were out. We were safe, or so I thought. As we merged onto the highway, the rhythmic hum of the tires on the asphalt, a comforting mantra, a new sound joined the chorus. It was quiet, subtle, and came from the back seat click. It was the unmistakable sound of a seatbelt buckle being fastened. Chloe and I both froze. I looked at her, and the terror I saw in her eyes mirrored my own. We hadn't imagined it. We hadn't escaped it. We had just given it a ride. I don't know what's in the back of my car. I've never looked. Some days, when the house is quiet, I still hear it. The faint squeak of a familiar shoe on a floorboard when no one is standing. The soft zip of a jacket in an empty closet. It knew our sounds back then. And I think, a year later, living all alone, I think it's still trying to learn my new ones. Forget the picturesque postcards of the Appalachian Mountains. Forget the charming rustic cabins and the crisp, clean air. Because deep in those ancient, moss-draped woods, something else breathes. Something that remembers a time before man. And it doesn't appreciate trespassers. I never truly understood what the woods of eyes meant until that trip. Now, I see them everywhere. Before I dive into the kind of horror that burrows into your bones and sets up permanent residence, I've got to ask, if this story chills you to the core, hit that like button. Share your own strange encounters, your own unexplained moments. In the comments below, maybe we're not as alone as we think. Or maybe, just maybe, someone can offer an explanation for what happened. And if you want to hear more of these less than pleasant encounters, consider subscribing. It helps me know these warnings are reaching people. It was late October, just as the last fiery leaves were clinging to the branches. Chloe and I, both in our late 20s, decided on a week-long backpacking trip through a lesser-known section of the Appalachians in West Virginia. We craved the disconnect. The silence of nature, a respite from the constant hum of city life. We'd picked a remote trail, promised to be challenging but rewarding, a loop that would take us through dense forest and past a few rumored overlooks. We packed light, full of youthful optimism and a shared love for the outdoors. We had no idea what we were walking into. The first day was crisp air, the crunch of fallen leaves under our boots, the distant call of unseen birds. We set up camp near a small, gurgling stream, the stars a blazing tapestry above us, undimmed by light pollution. Chloe cooked a quick meal on our portable stove, and we fell asleep to the comforting sounds of the forest. The shift began subtly on the second day. The woods grew denser, the trail less defined. The silence, which had been peaceful, started to feel oppressive. It wasn't a lack of sound, but an absence of natural sound. No rustling of squirrels, no chirping of unseen insects. Just an unnatural quiet, punctuated by the rhythmic thud of our own footsteps and the occasional, almost mocking, creak of a distant branch. "Doesn't it feel empty?" Chloe murmured, wrapping her arms around herself despite the mild afternoon warmth. I nodded, scanning the trees. Every shadow seemed to hold a static form. Every twisted root looked like a gnarled hand. My imagination, usually a playful companion, was starting to conjure disturbing images. Out of the corner of my eye, I'd swear I saw movement, something lean and dark flitting between the maples, always just beyond clear sight. When I turned, there was nothing, just the endless, suffocating green and brown dot. Later that afternoon, we found a cairn, a pile of stones, on the side of the trail. It wasn't unusual, hikers often build them. But this one was different. It was too perfectly conical, too tall, almost like a miniature, crudely built spire. And on the top stone, there was a faint, reddish smear, Not blood, I told myself, just some strange lichen, but it looked too fresh, too viscous. My stomach twisted. "That's odd," Chloe said, her voice hushed. She didn't touch it. We hiked on, the air growing colder, the shadows lengthening prematurely. That night, the whispers started. Faint at first, like the wind sighing through the pines, but then clearer, almost intelligible. Words, perhaps, or names. My name, Liam. Chloe's name, Chloe. I sat bolt upright in the tent, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, shaking Chloe awake. She blinked, disoriented. "Hear what?" "The whispers, outside." She listened for a long moment, then shook her head. "Just the wind, honey. Go back to sleep." But it wasn't the wind. I knew it. I lay there, rigid, listening to the disembodied voices ebb and flow, sometimes seeming to be right outside our tent flap, sometimes distant, like echoes from forgotten hollows. I swore I could hear distorted laughter, a child's cry, followed by a low, guttural growl that brought the hair on my arms to full attention. My mind was painting pictures I desperately wanted to erase. Gaunt figures lurking just beyond the fabric of the tent, milky eyes peering through the mesh dot. The next morning, exhaustion gnawed at us. Chloe was quiet, her usual cheerful demeanor, replaced by a haunted pallor. We packed up quickly, hoping to hike out to a more populated area, but the trail seemed to have changed. It narrowed, then branched in directions that weren't on our map, directions that led into ever thicker undergrowth. Our GPS signal, which had been spotty, now vanished entirely. Then the hallucinations began for real. Not just shadows, but full-blown visual distortions. The trees around us started to twist, their branches writhing like skeletal fingers, their bark forming grotesque, leering faces that seemed to follow our every step. I'd blink, and for a split second, the forest floor would become a swirling vortex of mud and grasping hands. I'd glance at Chloe, and her face would contort for a terrifying second, her eyes elongating, her mouth stretching into an impossible, silent scream, before snapping back to normal. "Chloe, are you seeing this?" I choked out, pointing at what looked like a half-buried, rotted wooden doll rising from a mound of leaves. It was gone a moment later. She just stared forward, her eyes wide, her lower lip trembling. "Liam, the ground, it's not right." The ground wasn't right. It seemed to undulate, to heave and sink with an unseen breath. We were walking on something alive, something immense and ancient that lay beneath the earth, stirring. The air grew heavy, thick with a sickly sweet smell like decaying flowers mixed with something metallic, something like old blood. We tried to talk, to rationalize, but our voices felt swallowed by the oppressive silence. Every time I spoke, my voice sounded alien, distorted, as if someone else was speaking through me. We pressed on, desperation mounting. We passed the same gnarled oak tree 3 times, the same oddly shaped boulder. We were caught in a loop. Panic, cold and sharp, finally gripped us. I started running, pushing through the tangled brush, ignoring Chloe's frantic cries behind me. I had to escape. I had to break free of whatever ancient, malevolent force was playing with our minds. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but the terror was a stronger fuel. And then I saw it. Not a shadow, not a hallucination, but a concrete form. Standing perhaps 30 feet ahead, partially obscured by the mist that had suddenly risen, was a figure. It was tall, impossibly thin, and disproportionately limbed. Its skin seemed to be the color of dried mud, and its head was too small, featureless, like a smooth, dark stone with two small, unblinking eyes that reflected no light. It wasn't moving, just standing there, utterly still, watching us, waiting. A guttural, wet sound tore from its throat, a sound that wasn't a roar or a scream, but something far more horrifying, a distorted, elongated whisper of our names, Chloe. Screamed, a raw, desperate sound that finally broke the spell of my terror. We didn't look back. We ran, blindly, through thorns and over roots, the monstrous whispers echoing behind us, growing louder, closer. We ran until our lungs burned, until our legs gave out, until the faint sound of a distant car engine, a blessed whisper of civilization, pierced the terrifying silence of the woods. We stumbled onto a paved road, disheveled, scratched, and utterly broken. A bewildered couple in a pickup truck stopped and eventually drove us to the nearest small town. We told them we'd gotten lost, nothing more. How could we explain? It's been months since that trip. Chloe and I are back in our apartment, miles away from those mountains. We rarely talk about it, not really, but sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I swear I can still hear the whispers, feel the cold breath on my neck, and in my periphery, just at the edge of my vision, I see the shapes, the twisting trees, the shifting ground, the gaunt, featureless figure of the thing that waited in the Appalachians. It's still there in my mind, waiting, and sometimes, when the silence deepens and the shadows lengthen, I wonder if it's waiting for something more than just my return. I wonder if it came back with us,